Hello everybody and welcome to a BirdTricks Tuesday. I'm Dave Womack. This is Jamie Lee from BirdTricks.com.
Can they even see me? Welcome to BirdTricks Tuesdays, everyone. I'm Jamie Lee. This is Dave Womack. I don't want you to intro yourself, so that's why there's emphasis on that. This.
From BirdTricks.com.
Forgot about that part. So this week we wanted to go over why not to leave food in your bird's cage all day long, because we got asked that because Dave briefly mentioned it last week and there's a lot of questions. Also, I did want to say a lot of you have been asking questions that we've actually already answered in our Tuesday videos, which makes us feel really good. But if you want to check all of them out, or you feel like you've missed one, you can go directly to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/BirdTricks, and I made a playlist of all of our Tuesday videos, so you can find them there if you want to refer back to any of them.
I don't know if I can go back and watch them.
They're not for you.
How goofy we are.
They're not for you, and I will not be doing that either.
That's good.
What was our first topic?
Well, we probably don't remember because our goal today was to wear our child out so she would take a nap before 7 p.m. And she took her nap at 7 p.m. and now we are worn out.
Yeah. So that was another thing. A lot of you have been like, hey, feature more birds in your videos and stuff. And we know, like, we want to. But we have a kid and 9 birds, and we live on a cruise ship, and there's shows going on right now, 7 and 9. So we literally can't go in the theater. We can't even go in the theater in between shows to do it because we're not allowed to make a mess on the stage, and it's all set for a different show. And they're all backstage. So
sometimes it's tough for us to be able to have the birds in here. So what we're going to try to do is make it so that we talk about it, and then we can show you footage of us training. So we can kind of compensate for what you do want, but mix it into what we can actually do. So
yeah, we do understand that's what you guys want. We do try. It's just really, really hard because we wait for our kid to fall asleep. It's not before we can film the video most of the time, and then today, anyways, it didn't happen. So it doesn't usually happen. So it's hard.
Well, we should probably get to the point.
Okay. First topic. What was it again?
So I'll start this by saying that we don't keep food in our birds' cages all day, and one of the main reasons, well, there's a lot of reasons, but the main reason, in my opinion, we probably vary on this a little bit, is that in the wild, birds spend most of their day flying around, foraging, looking for food, and so we want to try to best simulate what they would be doing in the wild, doing that in captivity. So in other words, they are working for their food in the real world, and so in captivity, we don't want to dumb them down and say, here's your 24-hour buffet, fill up, because one, it's going to be unhealthy for them, and two, they mentally are not going to be healthy because they're not mentally fit. They're not challenged to work to find their food. So this is why we encourage foraging toys. We talked briefly in a few other videos about just take any bird toy, cut it open, hide some food in there, and there's a lot of different ways to get your bird used to eating the food out of toys or out of balls of paper.
I recently recommended somebody to this blog post. We have a blog post called Beginner Foraging Ideas or Beginner Foraging 101 or something like that on our blog. And it basically starts out with literally, you could put like little pieces of paper inside your bird's food dish. And just the fact that it has to like eat around the pieces of paper, like move them, is foraging. And then you can eventually put a piece of paper just literally balancing on the dish, and it just takes it off, and then you could like wrap it around the dish, and it goes from there. Just super simple stuff to get your birds that may not be used to this introed into it. So I'm going to be going off on tangents on this video, I can tell already. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So try the foraging, but also that we always say every interaction that you do with your bird is a training session. If you've watched our TV style series, One Day Miracles, you hear us say this every episode out of the 12. And it's true, it's because every time that you are with your bird, you are either increasing likelihood that the bird is doing something you want, or you're decreasing likelihood that the bird's going to do something that you want. It's always learning every time you interact with it. So if you are going to do a real training session, what do? You make sure that the bird's just a little bit hungry. It's motivated enough to try something to get a click and a reward. So it doesn't make sense to keep that food in your bird's cage all day if you look at it from that perspective that, yes, every interaction is a training session. So as you handle your birds, they should be earning treats for doing things that you want, and always have that in the back of your mind. We always talk about our show environment, and we have to be careful because what the birds do in the show is also a training session. Even though we're performing and it's kind of the end result, they're still learning. And so we've talked about this too, where Bondi was kind of messing with us. We had a big breakthrough last week where I had thought it was something I was doing on stage, and so I kept changing the pattern and routines and how we were doing it. And I mentioned this, how I would switch the tricks around. Well, the big breakthrough was that it was also what was happening off stage. And we had this issue back in Saipan years ago. We were so focused on training and the performing being what was happening on stage that we forgot our own advice that every interaction is a training session. So in this case, when the birds came off stage, it played as big of a role as on stage. So in other words, it is always a training session.
Yeah, and I don't want people, I know a lot of people get freaked out when you talk about taking food away or limiting the amount of food that a bird gets. And so we're not talking about taking any food away from your bird. All we're talking about is paying attention to how much your bird actually eats. Most birds in captivity are already obese. If you just keep that in mind, because most birds aren't flying around, most birds aren't getting exercise, and most birds aren't on a good diet. So before even training, we always recommend that your bird is first eating a really, really healthy diet before you even step into the world of training, because you don't want to motivate a bird without them being healthy. You don't want to do this with baby birds that are like hand feeding or just weaning or anything like that. So there's definitely some exceptions to the rule. But also we show this in, I believe, a bonus disc on One Day Miracles, where we show it with Cressy. Literally it was like 3 or 4, 5, maybe 5 grams made a huge difference for Cressy.
Yeah.
It was the difference between her doing something we asked and not doing what we asked. It was just showing interest and not showing interest. So it's not a huge gap, and every bird's a little bit different. Like some birds don't even care about the food. They'd rather be rewarded with praise or petting or attention or something. So you can always use different types of rewards. But
well, and even back to the point with baby birds, they don't hand feed 24/7. They get a meal 2 or 3 times a day, and so even that, you're working with the bird and able to kind of train with the baby food, if you will. Yeah, I know that might get taken out of context for some people, but I think for the majority of you, you'll understand what I'm saying, what we mean by that. So then, how do you do this safely? Get yourself a gram scale so that you can measure the bird's weight in grams. Don't do ounces, do grams, because you can be so specific down to little micro details. For example, a parakeet, a little budgie, should weigh 31, 33 grams, something like that. Some of our birds are 400 grams or so forth. So something to kind of keep in mind is when you're withholding food, and we should get into details of how to do that safely. We talk about it in other areas, but when the bird doesn't have food in their cage all day, you need to be monitoring their weight, because you might be starving your bird to death and not realize it. So measure how much your bird weighs and realize that your bird may lose up to 10% of its body weight. That's because if your bird has food in the cage all day, it's fat. 99% of the time they're obese, and so you have to limit the amount of food. And we go into so many different details on how to do that in other areas. I don't want to
I feel like that is such
here.
a huge, man, it's such a huge in-depth topic. It's really hard to cover in one of these videos. Man, to sum it up, what we do for our birds is we give them our BirdTricks diet, which is like a freshly made food. And what I found with our own flock is they do not overeat on this diet.
Yeah, they'll leave it when they're done.
It's really amazing, and it's very dense food, so you don't need to be giving a lot. You could give like 2 tablespoons and they would be fine. So we give that in the morning, and then literally by, I would say, as early as 4 or 5 p.m., they would be ready to train and be great to go.
Yeah.
And then at night we give them organic pellets. And the interesting thing is I was really paying attention when we were working at Silverwood Theme Park how many pellets they each needed, because we were housing our birds together, so I actually had to feed them all separately so they wouldn't fight. And if they're fed together, Cressy tends to pig out on everybody's dinner, and then Bondi and Bandit are hungry, and Cressy's like stuffed over there in the side and can't move. So I had to be really specific about how I fed everybody individually and how much they each ate, and it really did vary, and the metabolisms vary. So with Comet and Tusa, our Camelot macaws, Comet has a much faster metabolism, and Tusa has a much slower one. Tusa and Comet have different motivation levels. So Tusa actually trains better when he's a little bit more full than Comet, I would say.
Yeah, he has more energy when he's not super hungry.
Yeah, whereas Comet, he doesn't have to be super hungry, but he's a lot better flyer, and he'll go a lot further. He's willing to do more when he's a little bit more motivated than Tusa. So it's really quite interesting, and he works better for jackpot rewards when I can like really capture a really good thing. I feel like I keep going off tangents. I'm like so unfocused, it's not even funny. So hard to focus.
So back to the point with the feeding schedule that we're currently doing on this ship's contract is even though we have sun conures, we have African gray and rose-breasted cockatoo size, and we also have macaw size, even those 3 sizes, we're still doing that diet for everybody in that same amount of time space. What we're finding is that the conures are a little bit more hungry by that time of day than the macaws are. So there's kind of this give and take, if you will. But we'll end it at that point, but that's why we don't keep food in our birds' cages all day.
And I think like the main thing is that we don't keep treats in our birds' cages. So they don't get nuts, seeds, millet, anything that is a high value reward. They don't get any of that unless it's from our hand directly, and it's out of their cage for something that we ask. So they don't see any of that. Millet isn't a part of their daily diet. Nuts aren't included in their daily diet. So that's another thing, is your bird might just be totally fine with no food motivation and will just simply work for treats because that's the only time he sees it. Like, maybe your bird's great with that. As far as learning new things, something that maybe it's really having difficulty doing, birds tend to need a little bit more motivation. They need a reason to do it.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's a trick they already know, the motivation can be a lot less because it's like, oh, okay, I can wave. Yeah, that's an easy way to earn a treat. No big deal. So that's kind of the difference with that. Try not to go off the subject.
You need to put that on cue.
Yeah. Speaking of which, so the next topic that you guys asked about is how to put a trick on cue, and I kind of demonstrated this a little bit live in our Screaming Tuesday video, where I was literally training Jinx as you were talking to the camera. And what this looks like is we call it a begging phase. So once you've taught your bird something new, we'll use Jinx as the example because we're going to show footage of him. I'm teaching him how to talk. I'm teaching him how to say Bubba. And I'm trying to get him to say it on cue. So when he offers it is when I click and reward, and he usually offers it when I go to take care of them. So I'll just be taking care of all the birds, and I'll just keep a clicker with me and some treats, and I'll just click and reward every time I hear him say it. Then, once he's actually in the begging phase, which basically means he's begging for a treat by offering a behavior that he knows earns a treat. What this looks like is he continually says Bubba, and he'll just sit there and go Bubba, 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 over and over and over and over again, because he understands now that every time he says it, he gets a reward. That phase, when your bird just keeps offering that same behavior over and over and over and over again without you provoking it in any way, is the begging phase. That's the phase that you need your bird to be at, where you can implement a cue. So that's something that's like really, really important to understand, because it differentiates the point that you're either ready to implement a cue or you're not, or your bird's not quite there. So if your bird is in the begging phase, this is when you can implement a cue. And how to do that is you basically give the cue. So with Jinx, I will provoke him to say Bubba, and the way I do this is by saying it myself. So I would go Bubba, but I would also hold up my hand, because this is what I want to be the cue. So you would pick a cue, and this is my cue, and I would go Bubba. And as soon as he says it with my cue given, that's actually my hand, not my words, I would click and give a reward if he does it. And then I would do this over and over and over again, constantly giving the cue, and I would maybe stop saying it myself, and I would just hold up my hand every time I could tell that he was going to say Bubba.
I want to interject here too, because one thing that can happen too is you get him into that rhythm. We call it the Simon Says effect, and basically he's doing it. So he's anticipating Jamie to go Bubba, but then you would go and capture it before actually saying Bubba. So he would say it, but he's anticipating. You build everything up to be like, to when Simon Says, you get people into a rhythm, and then you don't say Simon Says. You would say Simon Says touch your knees, Simon Says touch your cheek, touch your forehead. And you get them into this rhythm where they're expecting you to say something, and then they do it out of automation. So that's another
really
part
point.
of that.
That's a super good point. So once I would basically do that, then I would hold up my fist, and every time I could tell that he was going to offer and say Bubba, I would hold up my fist right before he would say it, and I would start clicking and rewarding, clicking and rewarding, clicking and rewarding. Then I would not hold up my fist, let him say Bubba, and not give a click, not give a reward. Because you have to let the bird mess up in order to understand what does get the treat and what does not get the treat. For the bird, understanding what does not get the treat is just as important as understanding what does get the treat. So this is teaching the bird the cue. You have to let them mess up to understand what the cue means.
I think that's where a lot of people fail too.
It really is. The cue, yeah, people get all excited because they're like, oh, he did it, and they give a treat, but you have to only reward once you give the cue. Papa. 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 So what I'm doing is showing you what putting it on cue looks like. He's offered Bubba a few times and I don't reward, but when I do cue it, I do reward it. So you can see he's waiting for me to get the cue. He's getting a little anxious though, so he's offering it. And I'm mixing in other tricks that he knows just to change it up so that he doesn't keep begging. So you can see it's pretty much on cue, and it's just that he does understand that it gets a treat. So he's just offering it a little bit more than usual. But this is all it looks like, so you just have to be really consistent, following our last video, about only rewarding when you give the cue and not when you don't. So I don't give a treat for that because I didn't ask for it.
It's also really important to train with no distractions.
So hard to focus. So he didn't respond right there, so I'm just gonna step away and ignore him for a second. He basically loses the ability to earn a treat when I step away and ignore, which makes it so that he responds faster in the long run of training, because he realizes I'm not just gonna keep my hand up forever waiting for him to do it. I'm actually gonna walk away and stop, and then he loses the ability to earn the treat. So that makes it so that he responds faster. Yes, Capri? You want nuts? You want nuts in your hands? Okay. There you go. Our daughter loves pine nuts too. So the other thing I have to be really careful of is when I cue these other tricks for him to do, he's also offering the talking. So if I click, I'm then training him to mush the two tricks together versus keeping them separate, and I really want them separate. He loves pine nuts too. So the other thing I have to be really careful of is when I cue these other tricks for him to do, he's also offering the talking. So if I click, I'm then training him to mush the two tricks together versus keeping them separate, and I really want them separate. So. Good boy, Jinxie. If I reward him anytime he does it, it's not on cue. It's whenever he wants a treat. It's no longer when I want it. So then the thing is after that is that, and which is actually where I'm at with Jinx right now, is I need to only reward when I give the cue and never when I don't give the cue, is what I need to do with Jinx right now, because he's still in the begging phase where he does it. He does it on cue, but he also does it begging where it's not on cue as well.
Which is okay.
Yeah, which is totally fine. But to make it more 100% on, I just need to get him really focused on only when I give the cue. So we'll definitely like show some of that.
Yeah, so you really have to break it into those phases where, one, they're just learning it, then they're begging for it, and then you're adding the cue, you're allowing them to fail, and then you're waiting till only you give that cue. And try to not get frustrated. If any point isn't working, it's probably because you rushed through that phase. So go back to the last phase where the bird was doing it well and start back over in that area till the bird's really confident, doing it great, then move forward again to that next phase of training.
Yeah, and that's pretty much how you add a cue to any trick, really. You would just substitute, what Jinx is doing with whatever your bird's doing that you would want. So if it's waving or shaking your hand or whatever, you just need to make sure that when you give the cue is when you give the reward, and you always let your bird fail so that it realizes what does and does not get a treat.
And it works for this whether it's a physical cue, which we like to do because in the show we like to give, point at the bird, wave our hand, do whatever, and the bird will do it without us saying something because we're mic'd. You may not care about that, so your cues might be a verbal cue. So you might be totally content by saying, say Bubba, and he says Bubba, and you click and reward. So you might even just be able to stop there depending on what level of training you want to take your bird to. Hopefully those tips help.
Yeah, and Bandit actually does have one like that. I say night night and he says night night, and that's what I just kept it as the cue because I was fine with it. So that's one of our non-physical cues.
Yeah. Should we reward anybody for top comments?
Yeah, I screen captured it. What did it say?
So the top comment from last week said, "Great video guys, also cool show. I was wondering why you shouldn't keep food in the bird's cage all the time and what to do instead." And so hopefully that answers your question. As always guys, leave your questions in the comment section below. We will make sure that, actually the person that wrote that, if you can email us info@birdtricks.com and let us know what prize you'd like, any one of our products, we'll go ahead and send that to you. So just make sure you give us your address, phone number, and we'll get that out to you, whatever product you want. So for everybody else, leave your comments and questions, and we'll pick this again next week. We'll answer to the best of our ability, and hopefully we won't be asleep deprived next week. But anyway, anything else from Ann?
I think the only thing is that a lot of the questions this week really pertain to our course, One Day Miracles. So if you guys can check that out, it's at birdtricks.com/one-day-miracles. We specifically did the bonus DVDs the way that we did them to answer all the questions that people keep asking us, because we get the same questions over and over again. And we actually show in-depth video footage. We go into full detail on that course because we actually can, and we can put it on a whole disc and lay it out for you guys. So I would recommend that if you want more in-depth detail on what we're talking about here, or you feel like there's holes, because there definitely were. We couldn't cover everything. What are you doing?
I happen to have...
Oh my gosh.
I have a copy of it here with us, so...
That threw me off. I thought you were just going to go shut off the camera on me
done.
because I was being boring. I thought you were just like, can't even tell her to shut up anymore. It's so hard to focus.
No, so this is, we're super proud of this, and every once in a while we'll product pitch you because I think this is a great course for anybody who is interested in taking their birds to that next level. Even if you're a beginner or you're an advanced trainer, it really helps you understand some of the mistakes, because we're able to illustrate the mistakes through watching other people correct those mistakes, and you literally see results in one day using positive reinforcement techniques for most of the episodes.
And it's literally usually just reversing one bad habit that the owners have created themselves. They always joked when we did these 12 episodes, everybody walked away going, wow, so you guys actually train people, not birds. Because the birds usually weren't doing anything wrong. It was, of course, the people. So
and this is a 7-disc set. It's awesome, and like I said, I highly encourage you guys to get it. It's 2 episodes per disc, and then there's a bloopers reel and more bonus footage, and then I think we actually have the 2 separate DVDs.
And then we have 2 separate DVDs that are bonus DVDs that go into the training diet and the stuff that we talked about today, as well as clicker training. Whoa! Ready? And target training, troubleshooting stuff.
So 9 discs. It's awesome. I hope you guys like it. If not, it doesn't matter because it's the end of the video anyway, and you could have already closed it. So that's it. Well, thanks guys for watching. We'll see you in a week.
You're a lot more active last week.
Great.